What are your thoughts about Wānaka Airport?
How you going? Thanks for having us, Nikki. My thoughts about Wānaka Airport are really straightforward. I think it does a really good job in exactly what it's doing at the moment. It's a general aviation airport, supports flight training, flight servicing, building of warbirds, recreational aviation, and has in the order of 40,000 aircraft movements a year. I don't know why we need to aspire to anything more than that. It's one of the best GA airports in the country.
Thank you. And what are the key learnings from the recent High Court ruling about Wānaka Airport?
Well, clearly that that the community need a say in its future. That was the core of what that was about. It wasn't so much whether QAC were managing it, about whether it was leased. It was actually about what the strategic future of the airport was. And until we map that out with our community and are really clear about what that future is, those other things are moot. Absolutely, we need to consult with the community, understand what the values for the airport are, and map out its future so we know where we're heading before there's any other decisions made around investment or management.
Thank you. And did you read the judgment, Quentin?
Yes, I did. Yes. I did read the judgment, and certainly took. I suppose I agreed with a lot of the points and the criticisms that were made of the handling of that, and agreed with the weaknesses that the errors that council have made along the way. So I thought it was good judgment, and gives us a lot of direction as well.
Thank you. Have you been informed, or have you informed yourself about airport issues?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's been one of the big issues of the last 6 years for me, and on this council term, and certainly, well, the two council terms and community board. As has been acknowledged, the community board has had little or no say in those discussions. Certainly in my position as a councillor, dealing with the statement of intents and the airport steering group, we've been very close to those discussions, certainly around the airports, and now I suppose more focused on QAC's involvement in Queenstown Airport, but and also now council are responsible solely for Wānaka Airport and have to work through that. So.
Thank you. Who do you believe should determine the future evolution of Wānaka Airport?
Well, there's a couple of levels to that. I mean, I think it is a solely owned and managed airport by Queenstown Lakes District Council. So the ratepayers and residents of this district are the ones who should have a say over its future. And there's a couple of different ways to do that, but certainly we need to consult with the community. We need to establish a airport liaison group, so the key stakeholders in the operation of the airport, the users of the airport, the neighbours, the neighbouring communities, all have a particular interest in that. So they're the sort of key aspects of that.
Have you read the Martin Jenkins report, Quentin?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. What do you know about the Wānaka Airport Liaison Committee?
Well, the Wānaka Airport Liaison Committee was, I suppose, a mechanism that was set up through the district plan designation. So there's a category of land, I suppose, that around the airport that says this is an airport and can be managed as an airport. That actually set up specific provision for a Wānaka Airport Liaison Group. And I think it's an appropriate thing to do. It's an obvious thing to do. It's been provided for in the planning, and I can't really see any reason why we shouldn't do that. And it should add to the engagement and the support to council as they manage the future of the airport.
Great, thank you. And you've almost answered the next question. There is provision made for the Wānaka Airport Liaison Committee in the QLDC district plan, but it hasn't been established. If elected, will you promote and support the establishment of the Wānaka Airport Liaison Committee, and describe how, please?
Well, look, we already have been, is the answer to that, is that, you know, through, I suppose, advocacy of the stakeholders group and others, that has been pointed out to council that is a shortfall. I agree with that point. I think that there is provision for it. We should enact it. We have advocated for that, and for the most part, I think council are taking that on board. It's moving probably slower than some people would like, but I think that the intent is that the liaison committee will be formed, and I think the community board and council will interact with that moving forward. But I suppose at this point it is probably a matter for the new council after October, and I would see that as something we can advocate for with the new mayor and the new council in conjunction with the council management. And I don't see any obvious barriers to that, but it is just time and resource to make that happen. So.
Thank you. What do you see as the key issues and considerations driving the airport's future?
As with any planning issue, they are multifaceted. You know, we need to be really conscious moving forward of climate change, because you know, how we travel around the world will be one of and transport in general are one of the key drivers of emissions. And until we have a low emissions or emission-free air travel, the future of airports and air travel is uncertain. So we need to have that at the forefront. The impact on our environment and our communities and amenity is really, really important. You know, that was one of my key concerns about the commercialisation of Wānaka Airport, really was the destruction of amenity in Luggett and Albert Town and the head of the Clutha River, areas that we enjoy and have general peace and quiet in those areas. And we've seen that, you know, the impacts of that on Lake Hayes Estate and even downtown Queenstown are just about high intensity aircraft movements, commercial aircraft movements. Those things are really important, and we don't want to destroy that. Those things apply for Luggett, for Terrace proposal as well. The potential for the approach paths and departure paths through the Upper Clutha, particularly along the Hawea range and stuff, can still have a huge impact on our amenity. And the flow-on effects of what that means, particularly Terrace, but also a commercialisation of Wānaka Airport around our infrastructure and what it feeds into our community, would need to be considered. You know, the risk of Terrace dumping enormous amounts of tourists into Wānaka has potentially significant adverse effects, and we need to understand those and the downstream infrastructure issues.
Thank you. And what is your stance on carbon emissions, and what should QLDC do? Please be specific.
Well, what should we do and what are we doing? That we're engaged with the climate change and biodiversity plan that council already has in place, and I'm part of the climate reference group that sort of helps oversee that. Excuse me. Operationally, we're making good progress in that space, so that the emissions that council are responsible for directly, you know, it's easy to change vehicles to electric vehicles. It's easy to not easy, but we are making progress around landfill emissions. But in terms of transport emissions, you know, we need to focus on removing and reducing the total emissions from how we get around. And as I touched on before, until we can sort of have a low emission or no emission aviation fleet, we're really against it, because that's one of our #1 enemies.
Thank you.
This district.
Thanks, Quentin. What is your position? You've already touched on this. What is your position on the proposed new airport at Terrace?
Well, my personal opinion is I think it would be a disaster for us in the Upper Clutha. We do need to understand how that looks for the future, how transport to our region looks for the future, but additional airports, not just the flight impacts, but the embedded carbon in the concrete to build a wide body jet airport is astronomical. The amount of concrete is just I don't even know where to start with that. So those things would need to be at the forefront. I mean, we have a relatively low population, and even with our worst case population predictions, 3 international airports in the lower South Island, being Dunedin, Invercargill and Queenstown, is more than enough to service our region. So we need to refocus that, need to take a regional view. And but I just think Terrace would be an absolute disaster for the Upper Clutha.
Thank you, Quentin. What do you see as the role for the Wānaka Community Board, and where should it fit with council?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is I suppose during the representation review, I did take the view that the community board isn't currently being very effective. We did listen to the community and make the decision that the community board should be retained but should be made effective, so that they as we move forward, I think that we absolutely need to make the community board more effective. We need a change of attitude around the type of work the community board are involved in, the responsibility they're given, and actually empower them to be more successful. So yeah, having made that decision, I'm 100% behind the board and absolutely want to make that. I think as we go forward, community boards and local boards will become more and more important, because we're heading towards, between Three Waters reform, RMA reform, spatial planning, and regional transport planning, all these things, and the DHBs and all that sort of stuff, the decentralisation of decision making, the delocalisation of decision making to Dunedin and Christchurch and other places will mean that the voice of the board will become more and more important in representing those views.
Thank you. So that's the 10 questions. We have one bonus final question. You have 1 minute to address the people of Wānaka. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Look, as most people in Wānaka will know, I've been an active advocate for the Wānaka community, both prior to being on council and being on council for the last 6 years. I've always stood up for the people of Wānaka, and we've also achieved quite a lot, and we've planned to achieve quite a lot in the coming near future. We have active transport. We've delivered 5 kilometres of active transport path, and we've planned for 5 or 10 kilometres over the next couple of years. We've got $150 million worth of infrastructure already in play, and these are things that we've never had that scale of investment in the Upper Clutha. So I suppose assurance that we are doing the work, we've planned to do more, and that I will continue to advocate for the people of the Upper Clutha. So
thank you very much, Quentin. Thank you.